So if you're like me, you've seen this thing called Finsweet everywhere, especially if you're involved in the Webflow community. And it's apparently something to add into your Webflow projects, involves code, and it somehow allows some cool functionality, maybe, I don't know, sort of. So I finally took the time to learn what it actually is all about. First thing that I learned is that it's actually called Finsweet. A little bit cooler of a name, yes. And it's a way to link a library to your project that allows a ton of flexibility, allows you to do a lot of cool things that Webflow might not be able to handle natively. And something else that I did these last few days was play Pokemon Shining Pearl, new game that just came out for the Nintendo Switch, Diamond and Pearl remakes. In case you don't know, I'm a little bit of a Pokemon nerd. It just brings a lot of nostalgia to me, so I always want to incorporate it into my life however I can. So I thought, why not combine this Finsweet library with a Pokédex. I'll show you how I built out this Sinnoh Pokédex and added the Finsweet library to add some filtering capabilities where you can filter out the Pokemon type. And I'll also show you how to add a search bar where you can search for an exclusive field and search directly for that Pokemon itself. And it's all done using the library incorporated with Webflow. So if you want to take your Webflow project to the next level, and in case you maybe want to, I don't know, be the very best like no one ever was, then stay tuned. So here's a look at the final project I have here. I have a CMS collection of all the Sinnoh Pokemon. Well, it's actually only 50 because you can only have 50 in an unhosted Webflow project, and I didn't want to pay for anything more, so I picked 50 of some of the good ones, so don't worry. You're able to click one of these buttons up here and filter out the collection list based on the Pokemon type. So you'll see water gets us all the water types. Psychic will get us just the little psychic. And you can filter all through these. And as a little bonus, there's even a search bar up here, and you can search directly for a Pokemon just by the name. And you'll see that all of this is happening without reloading the page. It's just a live filter happening right below here. So it's a great clean method with that smooth transition, and there's no reloading involved, which helps the processing time of your website dramatically. So it's important to understand the structure of this and how the Finsweet library incorporates with all of this before you dive in and start building things. First of all, what the heck is Finsweet? So it's a full-fledged design agency, and they have a really cool website. I love the tone and the whole vibe of their company, and just the animations they have incorporated on their website, the colors, just everything about it is really positive and current, and it's great. But they also have a great technical team that has different JavaScript libraries that you can access and incorporate for free into your projects, and that's where this library comes in. So basically, it's a line of code that lies within your project's custom code settings, and it links to an external JavaScript library that is hosted far away with Finsweet. So you don't have to know about the crazy nitty-gritty of the code. There is a little bit of code involved, but don't be afraid of it. But basically, you link to this library, and then you attach some of your own fields so it knows what to reference when styling, changing, filtering, all of that. But they make it super easy to follow. And for this Pokédex, I utilized one of their libraries, which was the filter library. And I incorporated two different components of the library, which was the filtering, which is where all the type buttons occur, and then the search bar itself, which is the direct search for a Pokemon. So the first step will be actually creating our CMS full of all of the different Pokemon themselves. So we'll have all the 50 Pokemon that we're making, and we'll have all the different fields and variables set to them so we can later reference it in the Finsweet library. The second step will be to create a style guide for the buttons in their non-active and active states. So what this means is we're going to have one base button state, but when we click on a button and it becomes that active color, the darker color with the box shadow, we're going to need a place to reference that styling so that when that class is automatically applied on a click, the library knows how to actually style it. The third step will be adding our buttons to the main page and then setting different link to attributes to the buttons, because the library will know what to target and then what it's going to change later on, but it needs to know how to change it. So in this case, the button will need to change out the Pokemon list, but it's going to filter it based on something, right? So we'll add a link to attribute so we can filter out by grass or by water or by psychic, etc. So step 4 will be compiling our code snippet. So we're going to kind of make this throughout the process, but Finsweet has a really unique script writer that makes things really easy to write all this out, especially if you're a non-code user. So we'll just connect all of our own class names to their code editor and make sure it's all in place so the library can be referenced properly. And then the last and fifth step, once all that's in place and all the buttons are working and filtering out by the Pokemon type, we can just add the input search field and then update our code to handle a second filter method. What's great about this library is that you can add more than one method. Like I showed before, you can filter out things with radio buttons, checkboxes, inputs. There's a lot of flexibility here, but we're going to use another input at the end as a search field. So now that we have a general idea of what we're going to be doing, let's jump into Webflow and start building. So first, we're in our blank project. All I have here is this header. This is actually a website that lets you write anything you want in the Pokemon font. So I'm just referencing that within a code embed, and that lives right at the top. So the first thing we want to do is create our CMS of Pokemon. Now, I already went ahead and did this because it does take a minute. You could upload the files into a CSV file, like an Excel sheet, and then import them all. But the images get tricky. I tried hosting them through an Amazon bucket, which is a good way to do it, but it was a little more complicated. And since I can only have 50 items in the unpaid plan, I just went ahead and did it manually. So each Pokemon has some fields that are set. We've got the name. We have the Pokemon's number in the Sinnoh Dex. And then it has the two types, Ghost and Dragon. It has the transparent photo of the Pokemon itself. And then I have two icons here, one for type 1 and one for type 2. So these are all the fields that will link up to the actual card when we make it. So that's all 50 Pokemon right there. All of them have their own unique fields set. And before we move on with the actual Finsweet part of things, I'm going to build out one of the cards of the Pokemon just so you see the flow of that and how I structured those, because they're a little tricky. So here we are in our body. First thing I'm going to do is add a container for all of this to live inside, just so it doesn't get too wide. And I'm going to set a max width on this of 1200 pixels. I'm going to add the CMS inside of it, and this is obviously linking to our Pokemon. And I want to target the collection list so we can change the display. I'm going to make it grid. It'll be a 3-column grid with a bunch of rows, just so we can absorb all the different Pokemon all the way through the bottom there. Perfect. And now I'm going to go inside of the collection item. And what's great is that when you build out one of these, it'll absorb into all the other ones you have set. So all I'm doing is targeting collection item. I'm adding an image. I'll add the Pokemon image, and there you go. It's pulling all the images from our CMS, but it's in the reverse order, obviously. So we want to start with Turtwig and number 1. So I'm going to go to the settings and sort the container by number oldest to newest, or lowest to highest. And now the Pokemon are in the correct order. I'm going to add a background image here. This will be the Pokeball, nice faded Pokeball. So it's basically a big container, and there's two divs. The top one is going to be the image div, and the bottom one is the content div. So the top one has the Pokeball with as a background, and then the regular Pokemon image on top of it. So now I'll go ahead and add a heading into the content div. Center this up. And flex and line the whole container so everything lives nicely in the middle. I'll add a little box shadow to this content div. Next I'll add the number, and the number is just going to be in a little box. And because I want it on the top left, I'll make the position of the collection item relative, and I'll make the number position absolute to the top left, so it lives on the top left of that box. Next, I want the two types to live side by side, so I got to put them in a div and make that div flexed. So that way they sit next to each other, the two type boxes. And I'll just get the icons from the CMS for type 1 and type 2. Same with the text for each of the types. Affect some of the sizing here. And I'm going to add another one right next to it with the same parameters for the second type. But of course, not all of the Pokemon have two different types. So I want to go to the settings of that element of the second type and just add a conditional visibility. I want to make sure that it's only visible if type 2 is set. So now you'll see that Turtwig, Grotle, anyone who has only one type just has that one bar, but anyone else with two, those will show up next to each other. So once we put the library in place next, it's going to start looking for text fields to pull from. So when we do the sort buttons and we try to filter out the Pokemon, it's going to look for either this name or the text of the different types that are available. So as long as those things are there, that's what it's going to be targeting. They also don't have to be visible. So say I had a bunch of other text here. I could have other pieces of text here that say like the year, or I can put favorite. And you can add different fields for different CMS items as well. The filter could still target those things, but if you don't want them visible to the viewer, all you would have to do is hide that element. And even though it's not displayed on the page, it is still behind the scenes and the library will be able to see those. So if I had a button that said sort by favorite, the Torterra, say that was my favorite, I could filter that out even though we don't see that it's actually my favorite there. But let's back up and actually implement the library now. So Finsweet actually has a really handy tool that you can use that basically makes the code for you as long as you tell it what your class names are. So basically this is the chunk of code that we're going to be putting into our project. So this is available on their website. You're able to choose which library you're trying to use. So say I was making previous and next buttons, or I was doing a CMS slider, which is something that's really popular. These are the different libraries that they have available, but we're using the filter, right? Because we're filtering out the Pokemon based on the buttons or the search bar. So this whole piece of code is all we'll need to access their library. That's what this first piece of code does. This is pulling from their library, their JavaScript library, somewhere else. We don't see the actual code that makes it happen. All we have to do is access it. And then we just pass it in some data through one function. If you're not familiar with JavaScript, I know this can be a little tricky, but basically just fill out the fields and then it will populate for you. So on the left here, we'll see CMS class list, or list class. In our project, the collection list that everything that we're trying to target lives in, that's what we're going to target. So this is the Pokemon collection list, right? All right, great. So we'll write Pokemon collection list. And you'll see, look, boom, it pops up right there. This is basically creating a variable where we're going to be targeting the whole collection list, and now we know what it's called. So this is just an array that is going to be holding the information that we're going to be targeting as well. This defines what we're actually applying. So the filter, my filters that we're applying, will be the filtering method, but it doesn't know what we're trying to filter, right? It knows we're targeting all the items within the Pokemon collection list, but it doesn't know what's going to trigger the sorting and the filtering of all those things. So we have to tell it what we're doing. So this is where we're going to have to create the buttons, right? Because we're going to have those buttons that click, and then when we click them, that's what's going to be able to tell this library what to sort by. Back in our project, let's make this container up here that holds the buttons. So in our body, I'll hit Command K, I'll add a div block, make sure this lives above our collection up here, and I'm going to call this button wrapper. I'm going to give it a max width of 1,000 pixels, just so it doesn't get huge, but this is where all of our buttons are going to live. So as long as it has access to one of the parents, because again, these are the buttons that the library needs to know that are triggering the filtering. So they all live inside of a button wrapper. That's what we just called it. It's just a div. Now the library needs to know what that's called. So filter wrapper, we just called it button wrapper, right? Great. So that's going to be right there. Button wrapper. And now filter type, it just wants to know whether you're setting it as exclusive or multi. The one that I have in place here is exclusive, meaning exclusive one. It's just filtering one type out. So I click water, only the water types show up, or everything with water involved in the name. If I click ground, water is deselected, and then ground is the one that's highlighted. There are still other types incorporated, but as long as it contains the word ground, it's going to filter into this array. Fighting, dragon, same thing. But you see how it's deselecting the other one. This is exclusive. So now if we use multi, multi is going to return multiple results. Now if I click grass, it filters out everything with grass in it, great. But now if I click water, it's also going to include water Pokemon in this array. So you'll see grass is still highlighted, water still highlighted. I can add to this and it's just going to keep filtering in every type that I click. So now it has a whole bunch of things, and then just click off it to make it exclusive again just to grass, or click off all of them to return to the main thing. But if I just click bug, psychic, you'll see. So that's the difference between multi and exclusive. For ours, we're going to keep it on exclusive. So now it knows what to target, it knows how it's going to filter it, just exclusively returning one of those types at a time. The next thing it's asking is for the active class. So this is what it's going to add to a button or whatever you're targeting when you click it. So for our purposes, we're going to add a button active class. And you'll see there, button active becomes the active class. So these are our basic button states, but when I click it, you'll see how it darkens and becomes more prominent with the box shadow. So that is a button active class. So we need to tell this to add a button active class. But how does it know what an active class is? And how does it maintain the different coloring and the styling for each of these, right? What we did here was we put a style guide in place. At the top, I have just a button, and the class is called button. By default, a button class will make it this gray basic button type. But now, for each of these, I added a combo class. So they all started as button, but then this one was added a class of fire. That gave it the orange coloring. It has that lowered opacity because that's the base state. And now I added a third combo class. So now this button is button with the fire combo class that keeps it orange. And then once I click it, that library is adding button active to this button. So it's creating a new class, and the class knows that if it already has button, fire, and button active, it'll become that full opacity orange color. So all of these are following that same logic. Button with the button grass keeps it green, and then if that library adds button active, it'll be the full opacity green. So that's what I did for each of these types. Basically just lowering the opacity, adding that little box shadow. It needs something to reference so it can maintain the same styling, because it can't just have button active, because then they would all look exactly the same, right? So it needs to be built upon another set of classes already established. So now this is where we tell it to do that. The active class will be button active. You also have the option to add an animation, which we do want to do. So by clicking that, it already enables the animation to true. And this is the animation that occurs when I sort this out. See how it kind of filters in nicely, it fades up, and it's all happening pretty smoothly. Animation is pretty nice, so I do like to incorporate that. And now duration, we'll just make that 200, just 200 milliseconds. We'll have ease out, and then we'll have it fade a little bit up, just like the one I was just showing you. So we can just do 20 pixels up. And now it creates all of the CSS within this function for us. And that's it, you guys. This is all of the code that we're gonna need. They have this amazing tool that lets you kind of do the easy non-coding way, but also creates the code for you. You don't have to know exactly what it's doing, but as long as your fields match up, that's all it needs, because all it has to do is reference what to target, and then it'll use the magic of the library behind the scenes to make it all work. But we have the main collection list that we're targeting here. We're applying the filter property to the button wrapper. So anything within this parent container here is going to be able to be targeted, but we only want to return one of those Pokemon at a time. So we set it to exclusive. And then we have the button active class added to this button when we click it. And then we just have the simple animation happening. So I'm going to copy this, but there still is one more step. So first I'll copy that and head back to our project. So now in our home page, I can go to the settings, and in our body tag, before the body tag, make sure it's down here. You can put it in the head, but there's a different set of code and rules applied. Look at the Finsweet website. They have instructions on how to do that, but we're putting it right down here. So now all the code is in place, except we obviously need to create our buttons, right? So the next thing we'll do, we'll just click save, and then we're just going to add all of our buttons in this container. So all I have to do, Command K, I'll add a button. And remember, all I have to do, if I just click button, that'll give the base button class, right? And then just go in order. So I'll do grass. That'll make it the grass type. And you'll see how it's faded. That's what we want. But now that third class of button active, see, it knows it exists, but it won't be able to add it until we click it. So that's what the library is telling us that we just put in place. So I'm going to go ahead and add all the buttons just to save time, because there are 18 types. It takes a minute. All right, so here we are. We have all of our types set here. So now the last thing to do is tell the library how we want to filter it, right? Because it knows that it's targeting the buttons in here, and it knows that it's affecting the Pokemon them below it, but it doesn't know how to sort them, right? How to filter them yet. So the last step to do is just to add a custom attribute to each of the buttons. You'll see the class name change. It's just because I copied this button button div from my other project, so Webflow automatically changed it to button 2, but ignore that. Inside of our button, we're just going to go to the settings, and down here where it says custom attributes, all we have to do, we'll name it filter by. Remember, this is telling the library how it wants to filter it. By clicking this button, what are we filtering the Pokemon by? And the value will be grass. Because when we click grass, obviously we want only the grass ones to show up. So I'm going to click save, and you'll see it creates that little custom attribute there. Fire, name is filter by, and we're filtering out fire. And the same thing for water. Perfect. So then you just go through and you add the filter text to each of these so it knows which type it's sorting by, and then it'll be in place. So let's take a look. I'm going to publish this project. So now we'll see when I go in here and I click grass, it works. It filters out all the grass ones because we told our library what to target, and we know that it's filtering out by grass. And then if I click fire, it brings up all the fire types. Water will bring up all the things found with water within the collection item itself. And you'll see how the text darkens because it's applying that button active class that we set. So now the button goes from normal button state with dragon class, and now when I click it, it comes button, dragon, and button active. There we go, beautiful. So the last thing to do is just add that search bar just to add another little feature to this. So what I can do here is just target our button wrapper, paste in a form block that I copied from that other site there. I'll make sure the button wrapper is just flexed vertical and center. So basically this guy is just a form block. You can add that element in itself, and then within the form block it just has an input. I deleted all the basic elements that come in a form block, like the name, the email, and the submit button. I got rid of all that, and all I did was add an input field. So now I have search parent here. That's the name of the div that the search field lives inside. And this is just a place to absorb data and then filter it accordingly. Let's head over back to the code that we have. And you'll see here, remember, this is the button wrapper, and this is the filter that we have because it knows when I target the buttons, it's going to affect the Pokemon. But now I want another one. So basically I can just copy this down. You can add another item to this array. Just add a comma here. And now, same thing, how this was the parent of all the buttons. What's the parent of the text input? This is called search parent. That's just the div that the input lives inside. And I'm gonna make this one exclusive as well, which means it'll only ever return the one thing you're looking for. And that's it. You can add as many things as you want in here. You can have radio buttons, checkboxes, the inputs, the filtering. You can have a bunch of things, and they would all just be part of this array. So it keeps it really condensed and easy to keep track of. Check out the Finsweet website. They have a list of the documentation on how to add more of these. But I'm just gonna have these two. That's all I'm gonna need. Remember how we added the custom attribute to each of the buttons? Because it knows what to look for fighting and all that. So we have to do the same thing for the search field. And this one's a little different. So it'll still have the filter by as the name, but the value, instead of grass, dark, whatever, it's gonna have just a asterisk. And this just means it'll be anything, basically. So it always kind of clears itself out, resorts to 0 or nothing. You'll be able to start clean every time you use it. So the asterisk just indicates everything. So now, because that is in place, I can publish this. And when I look at this again, when I go to search, I can search for, who do we want to search for? Let's just look for Lopunny. Look, and it comes right up. And then as soon as I backspace, any letter that I type, so if I just type I-R, you'll see that exists. Oh, it exists in all the fire ones because it's in the word fire, but then Giratina, Fairy, Electric. So this applies to not just the Pokemon name, but also the type that you're looking for. But say you just wanted to, look up an actual Pokemon. Typing in the whole thing will filter out everything but that Pokemon you're searching for. And then when you clear it out, because of that asterisk, it'll just resort back to normal. And then you can still use the buttons. You can look up however many Pokemon you want. And it's super clean, super nice. And that's how I made the Pokédex. So I hope you found this helpful and now have some understanding of the Finsweet library. I encourage you to keep building and try to incorporate it into your next project. It was unfamiliar to me just a few days ago, and now it's not, and now I love it. So it's great. Just apply yourself, and just, if you don't know something, do some research, watch some videos. There are tons of tutorials on YouTube nowadays, and you can learn it. And then you'll be a better developer and designer and have more skills under your belt. I hope to expand on this in the future, maybe make it a full Pokédex, add the other regions, or even make it sort of a team builder app. I've seen those before, which are really cool, where you can click on the Pokemon and then it drags it over, and then you can build your team of 6 and plan ahead for a new game. Speaking of new games, who did you pick for your starter for the new game? I chose Chimchar. He's a cutie. It's great. Let me know in the comments who you chose. But in the meantime, keep building, get out there, keep doing your best to catch them all.